The first thing people noticed
This
about the
truck
truck
is
was its
not for
age.
sale.
It's my
The
truck.
faded blue paint had long surrendered to years of sun, rain, and dust. Small patches of rust
Find your dream
decorated the
home
wheel
today.
wells like scars from battles nobody remembered. The rear bumper leaned slightly to one side, and the engine produced a low, uneven rumble that sounded ancient compared to the polished luxury SUVs that filled the neighborhood. To most residents of Willow Creek Estates, the truck looked like an embarrassment. To Ethan Walker, it looked like freedom. Every morning before sunrise, Ethan would step out of his modest home, carrying a mug of coffee and a quiet sense of gratitude. He would run a hand along the truck's worn hood before climbing inside and driving away. The neighborhood around him was known for its strict homeowners association. The HOA board prided itself on maintaining appearances. Every lawn was trimmed with military precision. Every mailbox matched. Every house followed regulations so detailed that residents sometimes joked the board cared more about flowers than people. At the center of that system stood Brenda Harper. Brenda was the HOA president. She had lived in Willow Creek for nearly 15 years and treated her position as if she governed a small kingdom. She monitored everything from paint colors to holiday decorations. Most residents tolerated her because arguing with Brenda often created more problems than it solved. Brenda loved appearances. She believed expensive cars represented success. She believed large homes represented importance. And she believed people could be judged accurately by what they owned. That belief explained why she immediately disliked Ethan Walker. His house was among the smallest in the neighborhood. His clothes were simple. His truck looked like it belonged on a farm rather than in an upscale community. To Brenda, Ethan seemed out of place. The fact that he rarely attended social events only strengthened her assumptions. She knew almost nothing about him, but she was convinced she knew everything. One Saturday afternoon, Willow Creek hosted its annual neighborhood gathering. Residents brought food, children played games, and homeowners mingled beneath rows of decorative lights stretched across the community park. Ethan normally skipped such events, but one of his elderly neighbors had convinced him to attend. He arrived in his old truck. Unfortunately for him, Brenda noticed immediately. Several residents stood nearby as Ethan parked. Brenda glanced toward the truck and shook her head dramatically. A few people turned toward her. The expression on her face made her intentions clear. She wanted an audience. Within moments, laughter spread through the small group. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others joined in. The truck became the center of attention. Ethan could feel eyes following him as he stepped out. Years ago, such treatment might have embarrassed him. Now it barely registered. Life had taught him that people often revealed more about themselves than about others. Still, he noticed the whispers. He noticed the smirks. Most of all, he noticed Brenda. She stared at the truck with open amusement. The message was obvious. People like Ethan did not belong among people like her. What nobody knew was that Ethan found the situation strangely ironic. If they had known the truth, they would have been speechless. But Ethan preferred it that way. For nearly a decade, he had hidden his wealth. Not because he was ashamed of it, because he had learned what wealth attracted. False friendships, manipulation, jealousy, people who loved money more than character. Years earlier, Ethan had built a highly successful logistics company from nothing. The company eventually expanded across multiple states before he sold his ownership stake for an amount large enough to change several generations of his family's future. The sale had made him extraordinarily wealthy. Most people in his position would have purchased mansions, sports cars, and private jets. Ethan had done the opposite. He bought a modest home. He kept driving his old truck. He invested carefully and quietly. He disappeared from public attention. The peace that followed became priceless. Very few people knew the extent of his fortune. Even fewer knew about the real estate portfolio he had accumulated over the years. 6 luxury properties, scattered across different states, generated millions annually. Each mansion sat in an exclusive location. Each was fully owned. Each was worth more than every house in Willow Creek combined. Yet Ethan never spoke about them. To him, wealth was a tool, not an identity. Unfortunately, people like Brenda could not imagine such a mindset. The following Monday, Ethan found a notice attached to his mailbox. It came from the HOA. The complaint concerned vehicle appearance. According to the letter, his truck negatively affected community aesthetics. The wording was formal. The intention was personal. Ethan sighed. This was not the first notice. Over the previous 6 months, HOA complaints had increased dramatically. Minor issues suddenly became major violations. A garbage can left outside too long. A hedge trimmed incorrectly. A driveway stain that nobody else seemed required to remove. Each complaint carried Brenda's fingerprints. Ethan understood exactly what was happening. She wanted him gone. What she didn't understand was that he had no intention of leaving. He had purchased the house because it reminded him of the neighborhood where he grew up. The size didn't matter. The prestige didn't matter. The memories mattered. Over the following weeks, the situation escalated. More notices arrived. More inspections occurred. More fines appeared. Residents began noticing. Even those who liked Brenda privately admitted the attention seemed excessive. Still, nobody challenged her directly. People feared becoming her next target. Brenda interpreted their silence as support. Her confidence grew. She became increasingly convinced that Ethan was hiding financial problems. She imagined him struggling to keep up appearances. She imagined foreclosure notices arriving soon. She imagined him eventually selling the house and leaving. The possibility brought her satisfaction. Meanwhile, Ethan continued living exactly as before. He drove the truck. He greeted neighbors politely. He ignored gossip. But something was beginning to change. People were watching. Not just Brenda's actions. Ethan's reactions. Most residents expected anger. They expected arguments. Instead, they witnessed patience. Notice after notice arrived. Yet Ethan never retaliated. The contrast slowly altered perceptions. Questions began forming. Why would someone remain so calm under constant pressure? Why did he never seem worried? Why did a man driving a rusted truck always appear more relaxed than residents living in million-dollar homes? The mystery fascinated people. Then an unexpected event changed everything. One afternoon, a severe storm swept through the area. Power lines fell. Trees crashed across roads. Several homes suffered significant damage. Among the hardest-hit properties was Brenda's house. A massive oak tree collapsed across part of her roof. Insurance complications delayed repairs. Contractors were overwhelmed. For the first time in years, Brenda found herself facing a situation she could not control. Stress consumed her. Deadlines approached. Expenses mounted. The polished confidence she displayed at HOA meetings began cracking. Most neighbors offered sympathy. Few offered real help. Everyone was busy protecting their own property. Then something happened that nobody expected. Especially Brenda. The person who arrived at her doorstep with assistance was Ethan Walker. The same man she had spent months targeting. The same man she mocked publicly. The same man whose truck she hated. Without seeking recognition, Ethan organized cleanup crews. He connected her with reliable contractors. He even covered several emergency expenses anonymously through a local relief fund. Brenda never learned who paid. Not yet. But she benefited from the help. For a brief moment, Guilt tried to enter her heart. Unfortunately, pride blocked the door. Instead of reflecting on Ethan's kindness, Brenda convinced herself she deserved it. The storm passed. Repairs began. Life slowly returned to normal. Yet beneath the surface, bigger changes were already moving into place. A luxury real estate magazine would soon publish a feature story. A story involving 6 extraordinary mansions. A story featuring one mysterious owner. A story that would travel across social media faster than anyone expected. And when Brenda finally discovered who owned those 6 hidden estates, the laughter that once echoed through Willow Creek Estates would disappear forever. Because the man she treated like a failure was about to become the most talked-about resident in the entire community. And the truth would leave her in tears. The story appeared on a Thursday morning. At first, almost nobody in Willow Creek Estates paid attention. Luxury real estate magazines were not unusual. Every month they featured celebrities, business executives, investors, and wealthy families showing off extravagant homes worth millions of dollars. Most residents flipped through such articles for entertainment before returning to their normal routines. This article seemed no different. The cover displayed a breathtaking oceanfront mansion perched on a cliff overlooking crashing waves. The property looked more like a luxury resort than a private residence. The headline immediately attracted attention. The man who owns 6 mansions, but drives a 20-year-old truck. The title sounded unusual enough to spark curiosity. Readers expected another eccentric billionaire seeking publicity. Instead, they discovered something entirely different. The article described a mysterious investor whose identity had remained largely unknown despite controlling an impressive collection of luxury properties spread across the country. There was a beachfront estate in California, a mountain retreat in Colorado, a lakeside mansion in Michigan, a historic property in South Carolina, a luxury ranch in Texas, and a modern estate overlooking the Arizona desert. Each property was worth millions. Together, they represented a real estate empire valued at more than $50 million. Yet what fascinated journalists was not the wealth. It was the owner. According to the article, he lived in a modest neighborhood. He rarely attended social events. He avoided public attention. He continued driving an old truck despite possessing the financial ability to purchase virtually any vehicle in the world. His philosophy was simple. Wealth should create freedom, not become a performance. The article included several photographs. Photos of stunning properties. Photos of breathtaking views. Photos of private gardens, luxury pools, and architectural masterpieces. Then, near the end of the feature, readers finally saw a picture of the owner. A simple photograph. No expensive suit. No luxury watch. No flashy smile. Just a man standing beside a weathered blue truck. A man named Ethan Walker. Within hours, the article exploded online. The contrast fascinated people. Millions of viewers shared the story. Comments flooded social media. People praised Ethan's humility. Business blogs discussed his investment strategies. Financial websites highlighted his lifestyle choices. The story spread rapidly. Eventually, it reached Willow Creek Estates. And everything changed. The first resident to recognize Ethan was a retired banker named Richard Collins. He nearly dropped his coffee when he saw the article. At first, he assumed it was a coincidence. The resemblance seemed impossible. But as he continued reading, every detail matched. The neighborhood, the truck, the age, the background. There could be no mistake. The man living quietly down the street was the owner of 6 luxury mansions. Within an hour, screenshots began circulating through neighborhood group chats. By lunchtime, nearly everyone had seen the article. By evening, it had become the only topic anyone discussed. Residents who barely knew Ethan suddenly wanted to know everything. People replayed years of interactions in their minds. Some remembered his kindness. Some remembered his generosity. Some remembered occasions when he quietly helped neighbors without expecting recognition. A few remembered borrowing tools from him. Others remembered him helping elderly residents during emergencies. The more people thought about it, the more one realization became unavoidable. Ethan had never acted wealthy, but he had always acted rich in character. Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, Brenda Harper sat frozen in front of her laptop. She had read the article 3 times, then 4, then 5. Her eyes repeatedly returned to the photograph. The truck, the face, the name. Every detail confirmed the same horrifying truth. The man she had mocked publicly was worth more money than she could comprehend. The realization struck her pride like a wrecking ball. For months, she had assumed Ethan struggled financially. For months, she had treated him as inferior. For months, she had built an entire narrative around assumptions. Now that narrative had collapsed, and beneath the ruins stood an uncomfortable truth. She had judged a person's worth based entirely on appearances. The article created another problem. People started asking questions. Questions Brenda could not answer. Why had Ethan received so many HOA violations? Why had his truck become such a frequent target? Why had enforcement seemed so selective? Why did complaints increase shortly after Brenda became HOA president? Residents began comparing notes. Patterns emerged quickly. Several homeowners remembered conversations. Others recalled meetings. Some had witnessed interactions firsthand. The evidence painted an increasingly troubling picture. What once seemed like strict enforcement now appeared personal. And people noticed. The following HOA meeting became the most crowded gathering in neighborhood history. Normally, only a handful of residents attended. This time, nearly every chair was occupied. The atmosphere felt tense. Whispers filled the room. Eyes shifted constantly toward Brenda. She sensed trouble immediately. For years, she had controlled meetings effortlessly. Tonight felt different. The confidence she once carried seemed noticeably absent. As discussions began, residents quickly moved beyond routine topics. The conversation shifted toward fairness, consistency, leadership, accountability. Nobody mentioned Ethan directly at first, but everyone understood the real issue. Eventually, one homeowner presented printed copies of violation records. Another displayed comparison photographs. Several residents described experiences involving selective enforcement. The room grew increasingly uncomfortable. Brenda attempted to defend her decisions, but the explanations sounded weak. Facts spoke louder. Records spoke louder. Patterns spoke louder. For the first time in years, people openly challenged her authority. And for the first time, she had no effective response. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely absent from the meeting. He had received an invitation. He chose not to attend. Instead, he spent the evening helping an elderly neighbor repair a damaged fence. The irony was almost poetic. As residents debated his treatment, he continued living exactly as before. He had no interest in revenge, no desire for public humiliation, no intention of exposing Brenda. Life had already taught him an important lesson. Karma often worked best without assistance. The following week brought another unexpected development. A regional news station aired a special segment featuring Ethan's story. The interview took place at one of his properties. Viewers expected luxury. They expected bragging. They expected displays of wealth. Instead, they encountered humility. The segment focused on financial discipline, community service, long-term investing, Personal values. The reporter repeatedly emphasized Ethan's unusual perspective. He believed material possessions should never determine a person's value. He believed character mattered more than status. He believed success meant having enough freedom to help others. Those messages resonated with viewers, but they devastated Brenda, because each statement felt like an indirect reminder of her own behavior. Her reputation began deteriorating. Neighbors who once admired her leadership now questioned her judgment. Residents became distant. Conversations shortened. Invitations disappeared. For the first time in many years, Brenda experienced something unfamiliar: isolation. Yet the hardest moment still lay ahead. Several weeks later, a neighborhood charity fundraiser was organized. The event aimed to support families affected by recent storms throughout the county. Local businesses contributed. Residents donated supplies. Community leaders offered assistance. Attendance exceeded expectations. Near the end of the evening, organizers announced a surprise donation. The audience listened attentively. Nobody expected what came next. A single anonymous contribution had covered nearly half the fundraiser's goal. The amount stunned everyone. Gasps spread through the crowd. Organizers initially withheld the donor's identity. But after repeated requests, permission was granted. The name appeared on a projection screen: Ethan Walker. The room erupted into applause. People stood. Some cheered. Others smiled. Several residents who once ignored Ethan now viewed him with admiration. Not because he was wealthy, because he used his wealth to help others. Brenda sat silently near the back of the room. Every clap felt heavier than the last. The applause wasn't celebrating money. It was celebrating character. And that realization hurt more than any public criticism. For months, she had focused on appearances. Meanwhile, Ethan had quietly improved lives without seeking credit. The comparison was impossible to ignore. As applause continued, Brenda felt something she had avoided for a very long time. Shame. Real shame. Not because Ethan was rich. Because he had been kind. Even after everything she had done. Even after the public ridicule. Even after the violations. Even after the unfair treatment. He had still chosen generosity. That truth followed her home that night. It followed her into the following week. And it followed her into a discovery that would soon expose something even more shocking. Because residents were beginning to investigate old HOA records. And hidden within those records was evidence that could end Brenda's presidency forever. Evidence that would reveal the true extent of her abuse of power. Evidence that would force the entire neighborhood to confront an uncomfortable reality. And when that truth finally emerged, Brenda's tears would no longer come from embarrassment. They would come from consequences. For years, Brenda Harper believed power protected her. As president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, she controlled meetings, enforced regulations, approved penalties, and influenced nearly every decision affecting the neighborhood. Most residents never questioned her authority. Some feared confrontation. Others simply assumed she knew what she was doing. That trust had allowed Brenda to operate without scrutiny. Now that trust was disappearing. And once people started asking questions, they discovered answers Brenda never wanted revealed. The investigation began innocently. A few homeowners wanted to compare violation records. They hoped to understand whether enforcement had truly been consistent throughout the neighborhood. What they found surprised them, then disturbed them, then angered them. Over several evenings, residents reviewed years of HOA documents, spreadsheets, inspection reports, violation notices, meeting records, financial statements. The deeper they looked, the clearer the pattern became. Certain homeowners received repeated citations for minor issues. Others received none at all for similar violations. Some fines appeared unusually aggressive. Some inspections seemed strangely targeted. And one name appeared far more frequently than any other: Ethan Walker. The numbers spoke for themselves. Over a relatively short period, Ethan had received more violation notices than several entire streets combined. The disparity was impossible to ignore. People who had once defended Brenda now found themselves questioning everything. The issue quickly spread throughout the community. Neighbors shared documents. Residents exchanged information. The conversation became impossible to contain. What had started as curiosity evolved into outrage. The more people learned about Ethan's treatment, the worse it looked. Especially because everyone now knew who Ethan was. Not simply a wealthy investor. Not merely the owner of 6 extraordinary mansions. But a man who consistently helped others. A man who donated generously. A man who never retaliated despite months of unfair treatment. That contrast transformed public opinion. Every new discovery damaged Brenda's reputation further. Meanwhile, Ethan remained remarkably detached from the entire situation. He never requested investigations. He never encouraged criticism. He never publicly defended himself. In fact, most residents were surprised to learn he had never filed a formal complaint against Brenda. Not once. Even when evidence clearly supported him. Even when fines became excessive. Even when treatment became obviously unfair. He simply continued living his life. That quiet dignity made him even more respected. People began realizing that wealth was not Ethan's most valuable asset. Character was. One Saturday morning, Ethan drove his old truck to a local diner several miles outside town. The waitress recognized him immediately. News coverage had made his face familiar throughout the region. Yet Ethan behaved exactly as he always had. No arrogance. No sense of superiority. No interest in attention. Just breakfast and coffee. As he sat near a window, he reflected on how strange life could be. Years ago, he had experienced the opposite problem. When his company's sale became public, people suddenly treated him differently. Some wanted favors. Others wanted investments. A few wanted friendships that clearly revolved around money. The experience had taught him a painful lesson. Many people admired wealth. Far fewer admired values. That lesson explained why he never advertised his success. Money attracted attention. Character revealed truth. Back in Willow Creek Estates, another storm was forming. But this one had nothing to do with weather. Residents organized a special HOA review meeting. Attendance reached record levels. The purpose seemed straightforward. Review leadership practices. Examine enforcement procedures. Discuss future reforms. Everyone understood the real significance. Brenda's position was hanging by a thread. As the meeting began, tension filled the room. Residents who once remained silent now felt empowered. They had documentation. They had evidence. Most importantly, they had numbers. One homeowner presented violation comparisons. Another summarized enforcement trends. Several residents shared personal experiences. The presentation lasted nearly an hour. By the end, the conclusion seemed unavoidable. Brenda had abused her authority. Perhaps not illegally, but certainly unfairly. The room grew quiet. People waited for her response. Brenda looked around the crowded meeting hall. Faces she had known for years stared back at her. Some appeared disappointed. Others looked angry. A few simply looked sad. For the first time, Brenda felt the full weight of her actions. Not because she had lost authority, because she had lost respect. and respect was far harder to recover. The vote came shortly afterward. The result wasn't close. Residents overwhelmingly supported new leadership. Brenda's presidency ended that evening. Years of influence vanished in a matter of minutes. As people left the meeting, conversations filled the parking lot. Most discussed future improvements. Others talked about rebuilding trust within the neighborhood. Very few spoke about Brenda herself. That reality hurt more than the vote. For years, she had believed herself indispensable. Now life was moving forward without her. Over the following days, the consequences continued. People remained polite, but the warmth was gone. Neighbors no longer sought her advice. Community leaders stopped consulting her. Social invitations decreased dramatically. The admiration she once enjoyed had disappeared. Not because people hated her, because people no longer trusted her. Meanwhile, Ethan's reputation continued growing. A local charity honored him for years of anonymous donations. Several nonprofit organizations publicly thanked him for support he had quietly provided long before anyone knew his financial status. The revelations shocked many people. Schools, food banks, veteran assistance programs, disaster relief funds, scholarship foundations. His contributions seemed endless. Even more surprising was the timeline. Most donations occurred years before the magazine article, years before publicity, years before recognition. Proof that his generosity was genuine, not performative. The contrast between Ethan and Brenda became a frequent topic of conversation. One person had spent years protecting appearances. The other had spent years helping people. One sought status. The other sought purpose. The lesson became obvious. Eventually, that lesson reached Brenda in a way she could no longer avoid. Several weeks after losing her position, she attended a community event. The gathering focused on local volunteer efforts. She arrived hoping things would feel normal. Instead, she experienced something deeply uncomfortable. Not hostility, not insults, something worse. Perspective. Throughout the evening, volunteers shared stories. Stories about neighbors helping neighbors. Stories about generosity during difficult times. Stories about acts of kindness that changed lives. Again and again, Ethan's name surfaced. Not because he mentioned himself. Others mentioned him. An elderly widow described assistance she received after medical problems. A young student described a scholarship that helped pay tuition. A struggling family described emergency support during a financial crisis. Each story carried the same theme: quiet generosity. As Brenda listened, she realized how little she truly knew about the man she had judged. She knew the truck. She knew the house. She knew the appearance. But she had never known the person. And because of that failure, she had spent months attacking one of the best people in the community. The realization lingered long after the event ended. For the first time, excuses felt impossible. Blaming misunderstandings no longer worked. Blaming assumptions no longer worked. The responsibility belonged entirely to her. That night, she sat alone in her living room. The house felt unusually quiet. The same walls that once reflected pride now reflected regret. She thought about the first time she mocked Ethan's truck. She thought about every violation notice, every complaint, every unnecessary fine, every judgment. One painful truth emerged above all others. Ethan had never deserved any of it. And yet, he had still helped her after the storm, still donated to community causes, still treated people with respect, still chose kindness. The contrast became unbearable. For the first time in many years, Brenda cried. Not because she lost power, not because she lost status, because she finally understood what she had become. But even then, the story wasn't over. Because karma had one final lesson waiting. A lesson far more powerful than public embarrassment. A lesson involving forgiveness. A lesson that would determine whether Brenda remained trapped by her past or found a way to change her future. And that lesson would begin with an unexpected envelope arriving at her front door. An envelope carrying Ethan Walker's name. The envelope arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Brenda Harper almost ignored it. For several weeks, she had avoided most community interactions. The embarrassment of losing her HOA presidency still lingered. Every trip outside seemed to remind her of the reputation she had destroyed with her own actions. The envelope rested on her doorstep. Simple, unremarkable. No expensive stationery. No dramatic message. Only a neatly printed name. Ethan Walker. The sight immediately tightened her chest. For a long moment, she simply stared. Part of her expected legal documents. Another part expected criticism. Perhaps a complaint. Perhaps a reminder of everything she had done. After all, if anyone had reason to seek revenge, it was Ethan. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The message was brief. Ethan had learned about the recent events involving the HOA. He wished her well. He hoped she was doing okay. He also mentioned a community restoration project that would begin soon and invited her to participate if she wanted. That was all. No accusation. No bitterness. No reference to the violations. No mention of the public humiliation. No reminder of her mistakes. Just kindness. Brenda read the note again. Then again. And once more. Tears filled her eyes before she even realized they were coming. Because the letter forced her to confront one final truth. The man she had spent months trying to hurt was still showing her grace. For years, Brenda had believed strength meant power. She had believed leadership meant control. She had believed respect came from authority. Now she understood how wrong she had been. Real strength was character. Real leadership was service. Real respect was earned through kindness. And Ethan possessed all three. The days that followed became some of the most reflective of Brenda's life. For the first time in years, she stopped worrying about appearances. She stopped focusing on status. She stopped measuring people by possessions. Instead, she began examining herself honestly. The process wasn't comfortable. Growth rarely is. But something inside her was changing. Meanwhile, Ethan continued exactly as before. The attention surrounding his 6 mansions gradually faded. The magazine articles became old news. The interviews slowed. Social media moved on to newer stories. Yet Ethan's life remained largely unchanged. Every morning, he still drove the same old truck. Every morning, he still waved to neighbors. Every morning, he still lived according to the same values. Many residents found that fact fascinating. Most people changed when recognition arrived. Ethan didn't. His wealth never defined him before the article. It didn't define him afterward either. In many ways, the 6 mansions became symbolic. People originally saw them as proof of success. But those who truly understood Ethan realized they represented something deeper. Patience, discipline, long-term thinking, years of hard work, wise decisions. The mansions were simply results. The real achievement was the character that built them. Several weeks later, the community restoration project officially began. Volunteers gathered to improve local parks, assist elderly homeowners, repair damaged public spaces, and organize charity events. Attendance exceeded expectations. Families participated. Students participated. Retirees participated. The project quickly became one of the largest volunteer efforts in Willow Creek history. On the first day, Many residents were surprised to see Brenda arrive. She looked nervous, uncertain, humble. The confidence she once displayed so effortlessly was gone. In its place stood something new. Honesty. No speeches greeted her arrival. No special treatment. No applause. Just an opportunity to help. And for the first time in years, that was enough. She picked up supplies and joined the volunteers. The work was simple. Painting fences, cleaning public areas, carrying materials, assisting where needed. Hours passed. Nobody discussed the HOA controversy. Nobody mentioned the past. The focus remained on the work. And something remarkable happened. Brenda discovered a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. Not the temporary satisfaction of winning an argument. Not the fragile pride that comes from authority. A deeper peace. The kind that comes from contributing rather than controlling. As the weeks passed, she continued volunteering. Gradually, relationships improved. Trust returned slowly. Not because people forgot what happened. Because they saw genuine change. Real accountability rarely comes through words. It comes through actions. And Brenda's actions finally matched the lessons she had learned. Months later, Willow Creek Estates felt like a different neighborhood. The HOA adopted fairer policies. Transparency increased. Resident involvement improved. Community events became more welcoming. The atmosphere shifted from judgment to cooperation. Ironically, the crisis that once threatened to divide the neighborhood ultimately made it stronger. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after the famous article appeared, the community hosted another annual gathering. The same event where Ethan's truck had once been mocked. The same event where assumptions had flourished. The same event where this entire journey truly began. This time, the atmosphere felt different. Children played across the park. Families shared food. Neighbors laughed together. There was warmth in the air that hadn't existed before. Ethan arrived exactly as expected, driving the same old blue truck. The truck looked no newer, no shinier, no more impressive than before. Yet the reaction could not have been more different. Instead of laughter, people smiled. Instead of judgment, people waved. Instead of mockery, people respected the man behind the wheel. The truck itself had never changed. Only people's perspective had. That realization carried a lesson far beyond Willow Creek Estates. Too often, people judge what they can see. Cars, houses, clothes, appearances. Yet the most valuable things about a person are often invisible. Integrity, kindness, wisdom, generosity, character. Those qualities cannot be measured by a bank account or displayed in a driveway. They reveal themselves through actions. As the gathering continued, Ethan stood near the edge of the park watching families enjoy the evening. Nearby, Brenda noticed him. For a moment, she remembered the first time she laughed at his truck. The memory still hurt, but now it served a purpose. It reminded her how much she had learned, how much she had changed, and how close she had come to missing the truth entirely. Across the field sat luxury SUVs worth small fortunes. Premium sports cars. Brand new trucks. Vehicles designed to impress. Yet none attracted as much admiration as Ethan's battered blue pickup. Not because of what it was, because of what it represented. A reminder that true wealth isn't measured by what people display. It's measured by who they become. The 6 hidden mansions had shocked the neighborhood. The magazine article had changed perceptions. The public revelations had exposed injustice. But none of those things formed the real heart of the story. The real story was much simpler. A wealthy man proved that humility matters more than status. A community learned that appearances can deceive. And a woman who once judged others discovered that character is the only possession whose value never decreases. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Ethan climbed back into his old truck. The engine rumbled to life. The same sound that once inspired laughter. The same sound that now inspired respect. Then he drove away. Not toward one of his 6 mansions. Not toward luxury or attention. But toward a life built on principles that money could never buy. And that, more than all 6 mansions combined, was what truly made him rich.